Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new edition of World Panorama with me, Frank Pereira, on Rajya Sabha television. Over the next half an hour, we'll bring you a roundup of all the significant events to have happened around the world this week. But first, a look at the headlines. Big blow to scandal hit South Korean president. Parliament impeaches Park Geun-Hye in a landslide vote. Constitutional court to decide Park's eventual fate. Italy's Prime Minister hands in resignation amid political turmoil. Matteo Renzi resigned 3 days after losing a referendum he had staked his career on. President begins consultations with political parties over forming a caretaker government. New Zealand Prime Minister John Key resigns in shock announcement, says he would vote for his Deputy Prime Minister Bill English if he put his name forward for leader. And deadly Indonesian quake leaves thousands displaced. Death toll goes past 100 and more than 750 people left injured. Hospitals struggle with injured while rescue operations draw to a close. Our top focus on the program this week: South Korean lawmakers on Friday voted overwhelmingly to impeach President Park Geun-Hye over a corruption scandal. The vote now needs to be affirmed by the country's constitutional court. Park has refused to resign, saying she will wait for the court to rule. Her duties have been assumed by Prime Minister Wang Kyo-an on an interim basis. If impeached, Park would be the country's first elected leader to be pushed from office in disgrace.
I announce that the impeachment bill of President Park Geun-Hye has passed.
South Korea's parliament has voted to impeach President Park Geun-Hye. The vote passed by 234 votes to 56, more than two-thirds the majority required for impeachment. The country's constitutional court will now deliberate the motion, a process that could take 6 months. Acting Prime Minister Wang Kyo-an will hold the post for the duration of the court's deliberation.
I will be responding calmly under the procedures laid out in the Constitution and the investigation by the Special Prosecutor.
The result of the vote was expected. Park has faced terrible approval ratings and massive protests since it emerged that her confidant and advisor Choi Soon-sil had access to confidential government documents despite holding no official government position. Choi also allegedly used her relationship with Park to accumulate millions of dollars in donations to her foundations. President Park denied wrongdoing but apologized for her carelessness in her ties with her friend. Meanwhile, thousands of South Koreans took to the streets to celebrate the news.
I feel really proud that I am at the center of this historic moment, and I hope that the new government will reflect the will of the people.
We still have the Constitutional Court to review this, but it will happen as people of this country have showed their power and will.
If court upholds the impeachment, Park would become the first sitting South Korean president to be deposed. In that case, a new election will be held within 60 days. The first female president of South Korea, Park's 5-year term was set to end in February 2018. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, joining me for a chat this week to talk about this is Sandip Kumar Mishra, Associate Professor, Center for East Asian Studies, JNU. Thank you so much, Sandip, for joining me on the program. You know, as far as the vote itself in Parliament is concerned, it was on expected lines, wasn't it? Because we saw that Park Geun-Hye's ratings had dropped considerably over the last few months, especially the corruption scandal when it came up. And also, we've seen that thousands of people have gathered on the streets of Seoul protesting and demanding that she step down.
Yes, I think lots of people, around 80% people, they were in favor of impeachment of South Korean President Park Geun-Hye, and I think it was quite expected. But in other sense, actually, when we look at political scenario, the ruling party, they were divided into two parts. One is basically pro-Park faction, another is actually anti-Park faction. And still actually, if suppose he would have announced that he is going to resign in April next year, then there was a chance that I think ruling party members, they would not have supported this impeachment process. However, it seems that actually Park Geun-Hye is ready to confront, and she wants that whatever happens, if impeachment is passed by parliament, I will go to constitutional court. Anyway, the matter will go to constitutional court. So I think it was expected, but still people were keeping their fingers crossed because political scenario, and probably that's why Park Geun-Hye, rather than resigning, he took this matter to parliament. He said that whatever parliament decide, I'm ready to do that.
And she continues to remain defiant, and she has said that she'll decide, she'll wait to see what the constitutional court decides. What's the process now? What happens next?
The next, I think, in next 3 months, that's the maximum period which is allotted to constitutional court. They have to decide whether this impeachment is right or wrong. And then I think once it's passed by constitutional court, then after 2 months, they need to have, within 2 months actually, they need to have presidential elections. Next leaders could be elected.
So this whole process could take up to about 180 days, technically.
180 days for constitutional court and plus 60 days for next election.
Okay.
So overall, it may take actually around 240 days.
Okay, that's a little more than 8 months maybe on the whole. So, you know, as far as the situation in South Korea is concerned, you know, what led to this present scenario? Are the allegations against Park Geun-Hye that grave that the people have come out in you know, huge swarms and protested against her?
I think it's important to look at actually her policies, because actually in the beginning she promised while having his campaign for presidential elections, he promised that he is going to bring something called democratic, you can say, economic development, in the sense that lots of classes in economy, they could be given equal, you can say, share. Somehow that could not materialize. Then in 2014, we see that actually there was a Sewalo ferry accident, and more than 300 children, they died in that ferry accident. In those 7 hours when actually the things could have been managed, she was absent. There was no trace of Park Geun-Hye. Then I think overall in unemployment, economic hardship, actually, especially among workers.
So it's a combination of many events and not just the controversy surrounding Choi Soon-sil.
Yeah, so it was basically building up, and when this Choi Soon-sil incident came up, people came to know that actually a private person was running the whole show. They realized that they elected President Park Geun-Hye to rule the country, but in spite, like in place of Park Geun-Hye, somebody else was actually ruling making all the decisions and deciding who could be the next secretary, who could be the next minister, what should be our policy towards China, whether we should have good relations with North Korea or not. So when they came to know that actually this Park Geun-Hye, whom they believed, they trusted, they elected to power, had been basically overpowered by somebody which is a private individual, they became very angry. And then I think more than everything else, lots of bribery, you can say, allegations are coming. That so many foundations were, you can say, established by Choi Soon-sil, and Park Geun-Hye provided all those, you can say, his political power, and Samsung, LG, and big business houses of Korea. They were pressurized to pay some kind of, say, contribution to those foundations. So people are overall having all these information now in the public domain. They are very unhappy, and that's why they wanted to.
And that's why the situation is what it is today. But, you know, has a similar situation arisen in the past as well, or this is a one-off situation? Of course, no South Korean president has been impeached, but a similar kind of situation has prevailed in the past, isn't it?
Yeah, I think in 2004 what happened, at that time elected President Roh Moo-hyun, he made certain statements supporting ruling party, And it was not supposed to be done, in the sense that election law says that president, once they are elected, they should not participate in any political activities as such, especially for one political party. So on this basis, an impeachment procedure was brought into National Assembly, and the impeachment motion was passed in 2004.
Yes.
But then the matter went to Constitutional Court, and Constitutional Court decided that he is not guilty of that grave constitutional violation, and he should be restored. So he was restored. But in that case, actually, it was some technical issue, and less than 20% people, if you look at public opinion survey at that point of time, less than 20% people supported impeachment.
Indeed.
In this case, more than 80% people, they support Park Geun-Hye.
Yeah, the situation is completely different, yes, to a decade apart. Thank you so much, Sandip Kumar Mishra, for joining us on the program and putting things into perspective for us.
Thank you.
Well, on that note, we'll move on now. Italy's Prime Minister Matteo Renzi formally resigned on Wednesday, paving the way for a rapid change of government. In a meeting with Italian President Sergio Mattarella, after the upper house approved his government's budget for 2017, Renzi followed through with the resignation he tendered on Monday. The president had earlier asked Renzi to stay in his position until the budget was secured. Here's more.
Prime Minister Matteo Renzi handed in his resignation to Italy's president 3 days after losing a referendum he had staked his career on. He had promised to wait until the Senate passed the 2017 budget, which it did earlier in the day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your affection. We are all aware of the relevance of this movement and an institutional point of view. An internal process clearly needs to take place, and I think it will be difficult. It will be very tough to have the clarity that the Democratic Party needs. But I think we need to get to that after we face the government crisis.
President Sergio Mattarella started consultations with political parties over forming a caretaker government on Thursday. In the meantime, Renzi is to act as the caretaker Prime Minister. According to local media reports, Mattarella is expected to ask a member of Renzi's cabinet or a politician from his Democratic Party to try to form a new government.
I think Italy needs a government, and a government that is able to govern. Our international reputation depends on it. Let's hope the government can govern for at least a couple of months.
Italians voted on Sunday by a margin of 59% to 41% against Renzi's plans for constitutional reform, prompting his decision to stand down. Two of the big winners in Sunday's referendum, the anti-EU Northern League and anti-establishment Five-Star Movement, are pushing for early elections.
We want the country to express itself. When it does express itself, it makes great decisions.
Some Italians express their concern for the future.
Allora, secondo me succede il disastro, perché rientra di nuovo.
There is going to be a disaster because the old school are going to come back. I think that is what is going to happen. That which we had before is going to come back, and we are tired of that.
Quello che avevamo prima che ci governava e che siamo stanchi pure di quello.
Why are we in such a hurry? Let's do things properly in Italy. We have to do things properly because people need certainty.
Names suggested as a possible leader of a new administration include Democratic Party Finance Minister Piercarlo Padoan and Senate leader Pietro Grasso, who is apolitical. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, it's time for a short break now, but still to come, there was yet another head of state who called it quits this week. We'll tell you all about it on the other side. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha Television. John Key, New Zealand's Prime Minister and leader of the National Party, resigned earlier this week in a decision that took the country by surprise. Key held a media conference in Wellington on Monday after informing the cabinet of his decision. His resignation will be effective from 12th December when national MPs meet to select a new leader. Here's a report. New Zealand Prime Minister John Key announced his resignation in an unexpected move on Monday. saying it is the right time to step down and he is leaving on his own terms. Calling it the hardest decision he'd ever made, an emotional Kyi said, "I don't know what I'll do next."
Just a few days ago, I marked the anniversary of my 8th year as Prime Minister and my 10th year as leader of the National Party. Such an occasion seems a fitting time to not only take stock of the past 10 years, but to look forward. Being leader of both the party and the country has been an incredible experience.
Kyi, a popular leader, said it was a personal decision and later denied media reports his wife of 32 years, Brona, had given him an ultimatum. He said he would not be seeking a fourth term in the 2017 election.
And I'm personally humbled and gratified that after 8 years as Prime Minister, my personal support from the public remains high. I absolutely believe we can win the next election. But I do not believe that if you asked me if I was committed to serving out a fourth term, that I could look the public in the eye and say yes.
Kyi made the surprise announcement during his weekly press conference. He set a date of 12th December for the formal resignation. He said his job required great sacrifices from those who are dearest to him and that his children had coped with an extraordinary level of intrusion.
Throughout these years, I've given everything I could to this job, the job that I cherish and the country that I love. All of this has come at quite some sacrifice for the people who are dearest to me, my family. For my wife Brona, there have been many nights and weekends spent alone, many occasions that were important to her that I simply could not attend. My daughter Steffi and my son Max have transitioned from teenagers to young adults while coping with an extraordinary level of intrusion and pressure because of their father's job.
New Zealand's Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Bill English, is now considered the front-runner to replace Kyi in a party vote planned for December 12th. Kyi said he would vote for English if he decided to stand. If elected, English is likely to continue with many of Kyi's core policies.
Well, look, you'd have to wait and see as to what the result of leadership change is, but I would expect that, like most policies, the direction will stay the same. I mean, I would expect that whatever the outcome of a leadership change, it'll be similar direction, similar approach, with similar impact.
John Kyi, who was formerly at Merrill Lynch as a foreign exchange dealer, ended 9 years of Labour Party rule in 2008 when he ousted Helen Clark as Prime Minister. He won the third term for the National Party at elections in September 2014, known by the local media as Teflon John because very little controversy has stuck to him during his time in office. Kyi is credited with steering New Zealand through the 2008 global economic crisis and out of recession. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television. Moving on now, an earthquake off Indonesia's northern Aceh province killed at least 102 people and injured over 750 others. The 6.5 magnitude quake struck just off the northeast coast of Sumatra Island, where dozens of buildings collapsed and many people were feared trapped under the rubble. Indonesia's meteorological agency said there was no risk of a tsunami. In 2004, Aceh was devastated by a tsunami that killed more than 170,000 people in Indonesia alone.
Rescuers combing the rubble for survivors after a 6.5 magnitude earthquake hit Indonesia's Aceh province at about 5 a.m. local time on Wednesday. The district of Pd Jaya, the worst hit, with the shallow quake completely destroying about 200 homes, shops and 14 mosques. The quake struck when many residents were preparing for early morning prayers. Hours later, there was reluctance to go back indoors as aftershocks continued to rattle.
Diperkirakan korban masih bertambah. We estimate the number of casualties will continue to rise, as some of the residents are still likely under the rubble of the buildings. The search and rescue operation is still underway.
Gabungan masih terus melakukan. Indonesian President Joko Widodo ordered immediate assistance to be sent to Aceh, an area previously devastated by a massive quake and tsunami in 2004. This time, Indonesian Meteorological Agency said there was no risk of a tsunami. But the quake has cracked roads and downed electricity poles, causing problems in delivering aid. The local hospital in Aceh was overwhelmed, with many injured being treated outside the building.
This is my wife. She is injured, but I don't know whereabouts of my children. Some of them were not at home. They stayed at the boarding school.
Aceh province is no stranger to natural disasters. In 2004, a huge undersea earthquake in the Indian Ocean triggered a tsunami that engulfed parts of Aceh, killing more than 170,000 people in Indonesia and tens of thousands more in other countries around the Indian Ocean. Earthquakes are relatively common around Indonesia, which sits on the infamous Ring of Fire, a set of fault lines that circle the Pacific Basin. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, much else has unfolded around the world this week. Here's a roundup of the other international news of the week in Globe Watch.
At least 50,000 terrorists from the Islamic State militant group have been killed since the US-led coalition started fighting in Syria and Iraq 2 years ago. A US military official has described the figure as a conservative estimate. The figure showed air power and a small number of US figures supporting local forces were having an impact. The official on Friday said that the coalition airstrikes could be intensified in places like Mosul, which Iraqi troops are now battling to recapture, but that had to be offset against the risk of civilian casualties. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on Friday said that Syrian army has suspended combat operations in eastern Aleppo. The move is to allow for evacuation of civilians trapped in the battle zone. Lavrov said some 8,000 people would be taken out. Government forces have retaken 75% of East Aleppo in recent weeks, areas rebels had controlled for 4 years. Nepal's Supreme Court has summoned Prime Minister Prachand and Speaker Onsari Gharti Magar and asked them to furnish written clarifications within a week, informing the rationale behind the registration of Constitution Amendment Bill to address Madheshi's demands. Media reports said the court ordered the two leaders to furnish written clarifications within a week and set 20th of December as the date for next hearing on the case filed against the government move. All 48 people on board a Pakistani International Airlines plane were killed when it crashed in the north of the country. Flight PK661 from Chitral to Islamabad went down in the Havelian area, about 70 kilometers north of Islamabad. There were 42 passengers, 5 crew members and 1 ground engineer on board. 3 foreigners were among the killed, with Austria's foreign ministry later confirming 2 of its nationals were killed and Chinese state media saying 1 of its nationals was also among the victims. Famous pop singer turned Islamic preacher Junaid Jamshed was also on board. Facing its worst winter pollution in a decade, Paris has introduced controversial traffic restrictions. Paris City Hall has barred half of all cars from travelling and made public transportation free. A similar scheme was implemented in the city of Lyon as the pollution hit various regions across France, including the Rhone Valley. In an attempt to curb emissions, the authorities have also banned the use of fireplaces.
Well, let's now shift focus and bring you up to speed with all the sports news that you might have missed this week in sports action. Future World Cup finals will feature 16 groups of 3 countries in a 48-team tournament if FIFA President Gianni Infantino gets his wish. Infantino, who became head of FIFA in February, previously spoke of expanding the World Cup from 32 teams to 40. Under his favoured 16-group structure, the top 2 teams would progress to the last 32 and ongoing knockout matches. A decision will be made in January, but any change would not be likely to take effect before the 2026 World Cup. Borussia Dortmund made sure of top spot in Group F of the UEFA Champions League after fighting back from 2-0 down against defending champions Real Madrid. Dortmund scored 21 goals in their group campaign, the most for any team in a group stage in the history of the tournament. Meanwhile, Sevilla made the last 16 for the first time in 7 years after soaking up the pressure to draw 0-0 away to Lyon. And Leicester City, who had already made sure of top spot in Group G in their debut season in the competition, suffered their first loss of the campaign 5-0 at Porto, who went through as runners-up. World number 2 Novak Djokovic confirmed on Tuesday he has split from his coach Boris Becker after 3 years working together. Djokovic posted a statement on Facebook on Tuesday saying the duo jointly decided to end their cooperation. The Serb has won 12 Grand Slam titles in his career, 6 while working with Germany's Becker, twice in Australia and Wimbledon, and the French and US Open once. The International Olympic Committee has decided to extend the provisional sanctions imposed on Russia over allegations of widespread doping. The IOC Executive Board said that the sanctions imposed on July 19th have been extended until further notice. Under the measures, the IOC will not organize or give patronage to any sports events or meetings in Russia. In addition, the IOC urged all Olympic winter sports federations to freeze their preparations for major events in Russia. The measures had originally been designed to apply until the end of this year. Usain Bolt has said he was shocked by the decision of Jamaica's Athletics Federation to abstain from an IAAF vote on a sweeping reform package at the governing body of World Athletics. The reforms aimed at changing how the IAAF operates were overwhelmingly passed at a special congress in Monaco on Saturday after members voted 182 to 10 in favour. I was very shocked I actually learned about that today, Bolt told the media on Tuesday. And finally, Athens inaugurated its holiday season on Friday by holding a concert and lighting up a large boat made of twinkling lights in the capital's central Syntagma Square. For decades in Greece, boats decorated with Christmas lights were the centerpieces of homes during the holiday season instead of Christmas trees. Athens Mayor George Kamanis gave the signal to light the boat, expressing his own Christmas wish for all the city's residents to celebrate as one. I'm going to leave you with these visuals from Athens. See you again next time.
Christmas